Welcome back to another episode of the CSK8 podcast. My name is Jared O'Leary. In this week's episode, I'm interviewing Vicky Sedgwick, who has been the host of most of the CSK8 chats on Twitter, which was actually the inspiration for the name of this podcast. In this discussion, we're going to talk about Vicky's journey into computer science education, as well as how Vicky's pedagogy has changed in virtual environments due to COVID, and what has stayed the same, advice for designing learning experiences in computer science, the importance of integrating computer science in other subject areas, some recommendations for improving equity and inclusion in the classroom, and building online communities in an age where people are questioning the value of social media, and so much more. There are many links in this particular show notes, and you can find those by simply clicking the link in the app that you're listening to this on, or by visiting jaredoleary.com and clicking on podcast. All right, so we're now going to begin the interview with Vicky introducing herself.
I'm Vicky Sedgwick. I'm a K-6 computer science teacher in the Los Angeles area, and I'm on the Computer Science Teachers Association Board of Directors. I'm also involved in writing the teacher standards, and I helped write the CSTA student standards back in 2017, and I'm involved with the AI for K-12 project as well.
So if you were to write a story about your journey into CS education, what would the titles of the chapters be?
They would probably be something like, I always wanted to be a teacher, the influence of a college roommate, me, a programmer, and serendipity. We'll just go with those four.
So what are some of the key things that you learned in each one of those chapters that inform your own approach to CS education?
So when I was a child, I always wanted to be a teacher. In fact, that's what I played all the time, was school as the teacher. And I actually majored in elementary education in college. That's what I was going to do. So I learned a lot along the way about, how to teach and all of that, because that's what I majored in and did that. But then my college roommate was a huge influence in that she introduced me, one, to computers. This was way back when. I'm fairly old. This was in the 70s, and she actually majored in, I don't know if it was called computer science then, but she was a major in computer science. And I got very interested in what she was doing, even did some programming on punched cards and everything back then. And she lived out in California, and she introduced me to someone who I ended up dating for a while. So I ended up moving to California and kind of getting into working with computers rather than getting into education right out of college. There weren't as many jobs available then, and I found a better paying job initially as a computer operator. And I worked at the same company my college roommate did. Then that company that I worked for did operations on mini computers, and then we ended up getting a DEC System 20, and all of the programmers wanted to work on the new computer. So I ended up having to teach myself to program to fix the programs that were still running the actual programs we were working on. We worked at a medical center and was running those programs actually on the mini computers, and they would break. So I had to teach myself to program in order to fix them, because the programmers wanted nothing to do with it. They wanted to work on the new computer. So that's kind of how I fell into programming. And I was a programmer for years, actually. I worked for that company. Then I went to work for a software company where I wrote application software for many different industries. And I kind of got back into teaching then, but more adults. At that point, I did a lot of the training for not the customers that bought it, but the people who were trying to sell our software. I was the trainer for them. So I had to, create all the training materials and train them. And I kind of got back into the teaching bug. But then I got married and I had kids. And eventually my job ended up ending, and I ended up just being a stay-at-home mom, basically because the company had moved and wanted me to move to Connecticut, and I wasn't going to do that. My husband was in California. So I became a stay-at-home mom, and then serendipity kind of stepped in because my daughter's computer teacher left the school at the school she was at. And I was asked to fill in as a computer teacher just until December. I was at that school for 9 years, 10 years, something like that. So it wasn't just until December.
Did they not specify which December?
Apparently not, I guess. It was initially like an applications course I was teaching. It was come in and watch them keyboard for 45 minutes or teach them how to use Word and things like that. And I found that I was bored with that. And so were the kids, right? I mean, they didn't want to type for 45 minutes. And having been a programmer, I went, I wonder what kids could learn about that. And that's when I kind of found the CSTA site and found the existing standards at that point, which were the 2011 standards, and went, okay, this says I could teach them to do these things. Let's try that. And I discovered Scratch and started actually incorporating more and more computer science things into what I was teaching until by the time that school closed last year, I was doing about half the year in applications and half in CS. Kind of fell back into teaching. And now I'm at another school as a CS teacher.
I'm curious, your experiences in industry, how has that experience kind of provided perspective for you while working with kids in particular, like young kids, or has it not really made that much of an impact on you?
It hasn't, except that I found, even with the adults I was teaching, I had to be pretty explicit in the lessons I created, because these were salespeople that were trying to sell our product, but they needed to know how to run it in order to demo it. But they weren't people that knew these industries, so I had to be really explicit on how to run things and how to do things. And I've even drawn on some of how I created those lessons, even in some of the lessons I started creating for the kid. You know, it was like, you shouldn't say you treat adults like, you know, a 5-year-old, but sometimes you have to explain like a 5-year-old, even to adults, right? So, and I try not to do that now when I talk to teachers, and they would tell me, don't tell me like I'm a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old how to do this. And so some of that has influenced, but the approaches are pretty different when I'm teaching kids versus adults. Even now when you teach them, I mean, you know, you like to treat adults as if they have some knowledge of things for sure going in, though if you're trying to teach a CS concept and they have no CS background, it can be helpful to say, hey, it's okay if you don't know anything. We'll get you there. So
how has your experiences with COVID either like changed or solidified some of your own beliefs around education, CS education, or just like a general philosophy of education?
I've always believed any kind of education, but especially CS education, should be, you know, really hands-on and incorporate, you know, student interest and student choice. And that has not changed with COVID. In fact, it's affirmed it even more, because if you're not meeting those student needs and interests, they're not going to show up for your class. You know, if they can turn the camera off, they'll turn the camera off. If I want them engaged, I have to give them engaging things to do and let them do it. You know, if I'm just talking to them, they're not going to be interested, right? So, but the other thing I've always liked to do in CS classes, since probably the second or third year I did it, was incorporate physical computing. That I've had to pull back on because with COVID, you know, do we have enough things to send home for kids to do? Not necessarily. We don't have those one-to-one physical computing things. We actually are lucky in that we do have one-to-one microbits. So if we stay virtual, later in the year, 6th grade, we'll be doing that, and we can send them a microbit. But not all schools do. Mm-hmm. We don't have one-to-one makey-makeys. You know, we do some makey-makey stuff with younger grades. We use Ozobots with the younger kids. We don't have one-to-one those, so we can't send those home. So I've had to pull back on some of what we do from a physical computing perspective, which is disappointing for me because I just see a light bulb go off when they do that physical stuff, right? The fact that, you know, blinking a light is so much more effective than, you know, hello world. I don't know why, but it just is, you know. The kids just, they light up when they're making that physical thing do something. And I think it also helps to teach those concepts of how hardware and software work together when you're working with something physical that you're touching. So, you know, that I've had to pull back on. I still believe it's important. We can't do it because of the restrictions of COVID. But I think the biggest thing is student choice, student interest, and as hands-on as it can be. Less me, more them, for sure.
Yeah, that resonates with my approach in the classroom and then in the curriculum that I've designed and then in the PD and whatnot. Like, it's all about just getting people engaged around their interest and just diving deep into that. One of the interesting things that I've kind of observed over the last few months is the change in questions and problems that teachers have had with going virtual. Since COVID basically shut down schools. So I'm curious, how have your questions or problems evolved or changed over the last few months while you've been dealing with this online environment?
In March, when we went virtual, I was teaching 4th to 6th grade. And those classes could pretty much continue other than the physical computing part, because at that point we didn't have one-to-one devices, so we didn't send those home. So we had to kind of change what we did, but so much of what we did was on Scratch or platforms like that they could just continue doing. So they kind of stayed the same in those grades. But then I was asked to take over the primary grades, K to 2, and you just have to approach it differently with them. How do you deal with the kids online, engaging, kindergarten student online when their attention span isn't that long, and it's just a difficult thing to do. And now this year, all our kids have iPads, all of our K to 2, so they can't be in Zoom and somewhere else at the same time, right? So it becomes this issue of how do I do what I used to do, right? It's evolved more now into how do I do what I used to do, because at the end of the year, we were just kind of trying to keep it going, right? Trying to finish out the year. With K to 2, we actually even pulled back and said CS was optional, so I had less kids engaged, and they wanted it to be totally asynchronous in K to 2 at the end of the year. So I just had to create things that they could do if they wanted to do. And they wanted it to be as offline as it could be. So the lesson was online. I did a lot of things actually with the Hello Ruby books where I read a chapter in the book. We used the first Hello Ruby book. So I'd read a chapter or two, and then they would do some kind of sequencing thing on paper, offline, then take a picture of and turn in. This year it's changed in that it's not optional anymore. I have to engage them in a Zoom meeting as well as provide lessons. The things they do can be online. We use Seesaw, and so I can have, actual things that they can manipulate in Seesaw to, fill out an algorithm or something. It's changed slightly this year in terms of our focus. But for me, my bigger concern overall always has been the big picture of CS, because we kind of continued. I'm in a school that we still kept CS going, but I heard so many schools say, well, when we closed in March, well, we're not going to do CS. All we're doing is the core subjects and no CS classes anymore. And I've even heard this year that a lot of schools are struggling to where to put it. They've had to move CS teachers into the classrooms because they need more teachers, because they need less kids in the classroom. And it's become an issue of trying to keep CS alive in a lot of schools. It's gone the way, even teachers that I know that are enthusiastic about teaching it, they may have been moved into a classroom. So they may be teaching it in their classroom, but the whole school's not getting it anymore, So I struggle more with the bigger picture. Like my school, I'm happy to say, still feels CS is valuable and is still teaching it. And I wish that were the same everywhere, but because it's not a requirement for a lot of schools, I think it's been put on the back burner.
What have you tried, or are you seeing other educators in any subject area in terms of how to keep K2 in particular engaged in these virtual spaces when it's difficult to, they don't have multiple screens and they are trying to navigate using a platform while also figure out how to use Scratch Junior while also being in Zoom? Have you seen any tips or tricks regardless of whatever subject area that might be useful for listeners?
And it's tips or tricks for any grade, but especially for K to 2, is if you're going to be teaching a lesson or doing anything, it's continually interrupt it with things the kids are doing, put a poll up, have them volunteer to answer. In fact, we did your lesson on fidget spinners on Scratch Junior. And one of the things we did was we talked about it in the middle. I actually had them hit the home button and go to Scratch Junior and tell me how many times it took to rotate the Scratch Cat around, for example. And so they went and experimented in Scratch Junior and then came back and typed an answer into the chat on how many times they thought it took until he made one whole revolution around. So it's interrupting and letting them actually go off camera and go do something else and then come back. They can still hear you. And I think it's being comfortable with accepting that even though you can't see them, you have to assume they're actually doing what you told them to do. If you've made it engaging enough, so it's now something they have to discover, they had fun going over there and making it spin around and coming back and telling me how many times, and then give them another little spoon-fed thing that they go and try. Because I can't, like in a real classroom, be showing it on the board and having them trying at the same time, I found I have to spoon feed it into smaller chunks now that they can then go try. It's not like you have it all there. Long term, my thought is I'm going to have to do more on paper that I send home that they could actually look at if it's longer code they have to figure out or do something with, because they can't see two screens at the same time if they're on iPads, for example. And you can split screen on iPads, and I could teach, especially my second graders, how to do that. But the problem is Scratch Junior is a full screen app, so it doesn't really split screen. Zoom ends up sitting on top and hiding part of what you're trying to do, like it hides the background or it hides the characters. It's a lot more awkward for them to try and use it. I do know CS teachers that are doing that with their kids with Scratch Junior. They're having them put the Zoom on top and they're, trying to demo, but it's a pretty small little screen, and I don't know that there is one right answer, and I think it depends on the kids. One of the things I really miss with something like a Scratch Junior is the sharing aspect, right? I mean, if I'm in a classroom with all the kids, we do a gallery walk and we try one another's projects and they show them off, or they come to the front and they present them or something. Harder to do now because Scratch Junior isn't easy to share out of, right? I mean, it'd be awesome if you could just create a video of your project that's saved to the camera roll, then we could share all those. But now it's teaching your kids to share their screen in Zoom on an iPad and demo their projects. And we're working on getting them all to be able to do that. My kids aren't there yet, but we're working on getting to there. So, because to me, that sharing aspect is something that I think is so valuable. It keeps the kids so engaged. And in fact, even with the fidget spinner, a lot of them, they posted in Seesaw a screenshot of their code so I could see they got the code and could see what their fidget spinner looked like. But a lot of them lamented, I wish you could see it running.
Yeah.
Right. So because they don't know how to record their screen yet, or they don't know how to share. But we will get them there. And that's got to be the goal of it, is to get them to that point where they can do that. But it takes a lot more of prep time from the teacher perspective. Like, I can't just assume I can go in and teach them Scratch Junior. I now have to teach them how to take a screenshot.
Right.
How to take a video of your project, how to, share your screen in Zoom. All those things I have to teach before they can be able to share. And I think we have to give ourselves the grace and realize we're not going to cover as much because we have to cover all these tech skills they didn't have to know before, right? So it's just teaching that. And the other thing is I would often pair kids up, and have them pair program, and that's just not as good. Working together can be really helpful. I would often take iPads and say, you're working two to an iPad, right? And you're working together, and you teach those soft skills too, and you can't be doing that. Even when we go back, we're not going to be doing that because they're supposed to keep 6 feet apart. So, all of those are struggles of how do you do them, right? I think keeping the kids engaged is those bite-sized chunks, though, and then giving them something they physically do. We're doing the Hello Ruby book right now, the second one with my second graders, and one of the things they do is go on a scavenger hunt around their house to find 4 computers in their house. Where 4 computers are hiding, because we specifically say there are hundreds of computers in your house. Go find 4 of them. And they come back with all kinds of things. And they have to tell me why they think they're computers. They're not physically bringing those back. They're taking pictures of them. It gives them movement and things that they can do, and they can come back and talk about them and show their pictures. And so give them things, to make them move. Give them little pieces of a project and have them do it one piece at a time. Don't give them everything at once. I would give them bigger chunks. Now I have to give them smaller chunks.
Yeah, my class was very conversational. Kids were constantly talking to each other, learning from each other, getting up and sharing and asking questions and whatnot. I'm curious, have you experimented with any breakout rooms to try and simulate that kind of conversation?
I have somewhat. We do it with our older grades all the time. I have somewhat with second grade. It's just hard to monitor them. And I have found, like with one of my second grade classes, it worked well. The kids would stay on task as I'd pop in and out of the rooms. In another one, they weren't staying on task. With the older kids, you can give them something, it can be easier to keep on task. Like that was my goal. If I was going to teach in fourth grade, for example, we use Scratch a lot, I would definitely probably use breakout rooms as a pair programming thing where the navigator was just watching the other kid program and giving tips and, whatever. Probably have to create paired accounts they could use so they could switch off who was logged in and coding, but there's a way I think you could do that with the older kids. Harder to do with Scratch Junior and the younger ones because they can't get the code from the other kid. They're not local, so it's not like you can airdrop it from one to the other and things like that, because I used to use that sometimes in classes too, where they'd write a progressive story and they'd airdrop it to one another and then write the next part, but you can't do that if you're not physically in the same space. So though that, when we go back, might be a possibility again, because they will physically be on the same Wi-Fi and be able to do that.
Yeah, and just in case nobody knows what breakout rooms are, so picture a full classroom all in one video conferencing session, and a breakout room would be like dividing your class up into small groups into smaller video conferencing sessions. So you have 20 kids, cool. You can make 10 smaller groups that have 2 kids each, and they're able to just converse with just the 2 of them, so you don't have 20 people talking all at once. I'm curious, so we've talked a little bit about like experience design in CS education. If you had a new to CS educator, so somebody who's maybe been teaching for a while but is now trying to incorporate computer science into the classroom, what advice would you give them for designing CS education experiences?
First thing I say is don't be afraid. It's okay if you don't know everything. And in fact, if you're in elementary, you don't have to know everything, right? You don't have to have a CS degree. You don't have to know how to program Java, okay? You'll find that a lot of the concepts tie in with things you're learning. Things like sequencing, patterns, all those things tie in with things that they're kind of already doing in the classroom, so you can find those ties. But the biggest thing I always tell everybody is to kind of underteach, right? Don't tell the kids how to do everything. We tend to think as teachers that we're the font of all knowledge, right? And don't be. Even if you are, don't be. Teach them just what they need to know to get started, and then let them discover something and tell you or tell their classmates, okay? 1, it sticks better. 2, they're more engaged. And then you can use that knowledge that they've acquired along with the little bit you gave them to kind of tie in that CS concept, right? But they've used some inquiry and discovered things for themselves. That keeps the kids more engaged. And the other thing I always tell teachers is it's okay to say, I don't know, let's figure it out together. And in fact, I tell people, even if you do know, say that, right? Because don't give the kids the answer. Teach them ways to discover the answer, right? And I think that's the biggest way to make it engaging. Help them do the discovery, help them figure it out. Don't give it to them. Yeah, you're going to teach little concepts, right? You're going to teach, okay, here's what a loop is. Now you'll go have them play with loops and have them show you what they discovered about loops. If all you do is give them the code and say, type this in, it's not going to be engaging for them. And it's not going to stick either. They're not going to remember it. So
yeah, that really resonates with my approach in the classroom and what we encourage. I will say that anybody who's trying this, it can take a while guiding through questions. Like I had 40-minute classes in the last district that I was in, and I would literally spend an entire 40-minute class working with one kid, guiding them through thinking to dive deeper into finally getting to the answer that I could have showed them in 2 minutes, but because we went through this process, like they had such a richer understanding of different potential directions to go into and just a deeper understanding of what they're trying to solve. So it's definitely worth it. Just know it can take a while getting to the answer. So you just got to be patient.
Right. And I think that's the thing too, is having the patience to wait for the students to figure it out. It's that whole wait time thing amplified, right? Because now they've got a problem and you do know how to fix it a lot of the time. It's so tempting to jump in, but it's going to stick so much better even if it takes you an entire class period to get them there. And they're learning strategies that the next time they get stuck, hopefully they can start applying themselves without you having to be there. Have bugs in their programs. They're going to have to figure this out all the time ongoing. You're going to constantly be jumping in and giving them the solutions if you don't give them the strategies of how to figure it out.
What about with integrating? So let's say somebody has a background in X subject area. They are not familiar with computer science, but they want to integrate it with X subject area. What advice would you give for an educator like that?
First, I'd say, see if you can find somebody that kind of knows where that might fit well and talk to them. Just pick their brain, right? You might want to say, hey, I really would like to do some of that. Where would be a good place to find that? If there's nobody in your local district or your local school, go online, find people and just pick their brains a bit, because knowing where to put it can be really helpful. Then also realize it will take some time for the kids to learn the tool you want them to use, right? I find it amusing almost. I'll talk to teachers and they'll say, oh, I taught my kids how to use Flipgrid and it took a couple days, but now they're good. And I taught them how to use this and it took a couple days. And then I'll say, well, why don't you do some CS? And they're like, oh, but it's going to take too long to teach them. Well, it's like any other tool. You're teaching them how to use it. And yes, it will take some time, but now you've given them another tool to use in their toolkit to show their knowledge to you. And you're teaching them some CS concepts along the way. The other thing that I do with teachers like that is I point them to curriculum that already exists that can help them to teach those things, like the Boot Up curriculum. I mean, you've got amazing lessons out there that they can just take, and it talks about, here's the CS concepts we're teaching, here's how you approach it. It even goes into here's where you might integrate it. And the SFUSD curriculum's also great that way. And it shows you integration points, it shows you how to approach teaching it, it shows you the CS concepts you're teaching. And it's freely available, so go out and find it and use it. Use those lessons to teach your kids what they need to know. Let's say you want them to create a math game, right? So you think, okay, what are they going to need to know to create a math game? Well, I can go out and find some lessons that teaches them how to make a sprite talk and how to make it ask a question and how to make it, check if the answer's right. So, you can figure out and find some lessons you can teach them to do how to do that, and then let them have at it and see what they can create, right? Let them use their own sprites, their own backgrounds, their own, theme for their game. And what I have found, because I've had kids do this, where you teach them the little pieces. I've gotten to where, I'm going to teach you random numbers, right? So it'll randomly create your question for you. And then I find they really like to practice their math facts because it's their game they created, or they want to play their friend's game, and what they really are doing is practicing their math facts, right? So think of the benefit you'll get after you have taught them these things. But realize it will take time to teach them. I think people go in thinking, I'll just jump right in. That won't work. You have to take the time to teach them first.
How would your answer change or be similar for CS educators who are trying to integrate with other subject areas? So they have experience in CS, but not experience in X subject area.
Well, I would say partner up with the subject level teacher. And I can find that can be fun, actually easier virtually, because they'll give you 10 minutes on a Zoom, whereas it could have been harder to get to them in person, to tell you what they're doing in class. So you talk to the teacher and you find out, hey, my kids are struggling with math facts. They just don't have their addition math facts. Well, then you can think in terms of, okay, oh, they're doing addition math facts. Well, I know how I could do that in a Scratch program, right? So now I could help by having them write that. Or you can say, go in and ask the science teacher, what kinds of things are you doing in science, right? And even ask for, what's the lesson look like? Look at it so you know what concepts they're learning in science, and then have the kids create that science simulation, right? So it's partnering with the teacher who does know the subject area, whether that's in person at your school, find a science teachers online, some way of partnering with those teachers to find out where would be those hooks where you could put CS in, right? And I find even just looking at the standards and saying, what should the kids be learning? Go look at the NGSS standards for science for the grade levels and see what are they supposed to be learning, and you can think, oh, well, that would be a great thing to do a simulation for in Scratch, or to create a little animation for in Scratch Junior, like, oh, they learn the butterfly life cycle, well, let's recreate that in Scratch Junior, right? If you can find out even those high level things they're doing, you can find lessons online that will teach you what that is, and then figure out how to hook that in with CS.
Is your advice for these educators, is it the same as what you would have given before COVID as it is right now? Or has COVID changed things in terms of the advice you'd give?
The advice is similar, but I do find sometimes it's easier actually for me now to get time with teachers because they're willing to jump onto a 10-minute Zoom, whereas couldn't always track them down in person, right? And to try and set up a time was harder. So sometimes it's easier for me to actually get with the classroom teachers now, but I actually think it's more important now to integrate, because the emphasis right now tends to be on those core subjects, right? That's so much of education right now is because there's limited time, or because we don't have enough teachers and we've had to move those specialty teachers into the classroom. So if we can get that integration piece going now, I think it'll be valuable and it'll keep CS education going, even in the time when there may not be a CS class right now because that teacher is now the fourth grade teacher, right? So I think it's even more valuable right now than it was before.
Yeah, planting seeds for future larger projects and whatnot. That resonates with me. So I know because of our conversations, because we've been on some of the same webinars and like the things that you've posted online, that equity and inclusion is a big thing that you have strive for and continue to strive for. Do you have any recommendations for people who are listening, how to improve equity and inclusion in CS and CS education?
That's a big hot topic for me right now, because so many times we hear CS for all, right? But it isn't CS for all. CS is an after-school thing, and so a lot of kids can participate. Or it's we'll try this with our gifted kids thing. Or it's okay, everybody takes CS class, but those special ed kids, we're not going to put those in the CS classes. So I think even if we're in a school that says we have a CS class for everybody, we have to make sure it really does include everybody. And we have to make sure that we as teachers are examining our biases and make sure that we are treating all the kids equally, right? Because it's really easy to have those biases and not even realize that, oh, I'm asking the boys more questions than the girls. Or, oh, I'm ignoring the special ed kids even though they are sitting in the room, right? So you have to be really intentional as a teacher to make sure you're being equitable and inclusive in your classroom. A lot of times elementary teachers, and I've always said, I'm really lucky. My schools have always said, everybody's getting it, right? So everybody's in the classes, but I need to make sure as a teacher that I'm being inclusive in those classes, because just because they're sitting in the room doesn't mean that they're getting the same education as the kids sitting next to them. And I think we need to be aware of that. But I think as a whole, CS education is not equitable and inclusive, especially in elementary and middle school. There are some schools that teach it. There are some that don't. It's not a requirement, even in those states that are starting to require it in high schools. It's not in the elementary and middle schools. Or even in my case, it was required and everybody took it. But if the classroom teacher needed a kid for something because they didn't complete something, they took them out. You have to be on top of all that and make sure that everybody's there. You also have to, I think, advocate at a district level and a state level, if you can, for requiring CS education. For my state has standards, for example, but they're not required and there's no money. So guess what? There are a lot of schools that aren't doing it, and it's the wealthy schools that are doing it and the poorer schools that are not. And so we need to find some way of fixing that. And I don't know other than saying, let's integrate it to make sure everybody gets it. And to me, that's the best way to say, we're going to integrate it into math or science or something because everybody takes those. And we're going to try and integrate it in. And there are more and more products available that do that, like Bootstrap Algebra or Data Science for middle schools, Project Guts for middle schools. There's Everyday Computing, which is math related for third and fourth grade math. Right now, it's with a specific math curriculum, but they're working to expand it so it'll be more inclusive of all math curriculums. So, look around for those, find ways to try and integrate it. I think that'll be the best way to make sure that it is equitable and inclusive of everybody.
Yeah, one of the critiques that I have on CS education research is a lot of the questions and data that they're collecting are about people in the room, not necessarily their perspectives on what they're learning and how they feel in it. So it's like, oh, we have X percentage of this demographic and Y percentage of this other demographic in this space. Okay, that's nice that you're seeing an increase in marginalized groups, but do they actually feel like they belong, or are they just being forced to attend something that they don't find relevant? So I wish CS education research in particular would ask those follow-up questions of, well, how do they actually feel in this? And what do they see long-term for learning this particular subject? Not just forcing everybody to learn something, but that's my own rant.
No, but I agree. It's like just having the bodies in the room is not the solution. That's the start. You've got to get the bodies in the room first, but are we actually reaching all of them? Are all of them feeling like, yes, CS is for me? Or are they still feeling like, I don't belong here? If they're still feeling like I don't belong here, then we're not doing our jobs.
So one of the things that you've really been promoting over the last couple of years is connecting other educators interested in computer science online, whether it be through one social media platform or another. I'm curious, what sparked your interest in wanting to build these kind of online CS education communities?
Well, it was purely selfish to start. I was the CS person in my school, and I didn't know any other elementary, middle school CS teachers. And so I started looking around for how can I connect with people that are doing what I'm doing, right? How can I make sure I'm doing the right things? How can I share some of the cool things that my kids are doing with people that'll understand it, right? I could share it with the other teachers in my school, but they had no clue what I was talking about. So it was purely selfish. I was trying to find communities, and there weren't a whole lot of them out there. So it was kind of like, well, what can we do to kind of build these communities? What can we do to kind of get people to start talking to one another? Because I know there have to be people out there trying these same things. I mean, this was a while ago, right? This was in like 2012 probably that I first started this. So it was, 8 years ago, and there wasn't as much, but there were people doing things. I was looking for a way to connect to them. So that was kind of why it got started.
So if you're to give like a sales pitch to somebody who's skeptical about joining one of these online environments, especially with like recent movies or documentaries or docudramas, whatever they're called, about social media networks and things like that, and how they're trying to take over your time and ruin your day, essentially, what would you do in terms of somebody who's skeptical about this and say, hey, this might be a good community for you because of blank?
Yeah, the skepticism is causing a dent in some of these communities, but if you are someone who is looking for a support group that can help you with where do I go next? I'm having this problem, how do I solve it? Or you just want to show off kids' work, you want to learn something because like the CSK8 chats, we always have a topic and, people learn a lot from them. When they learn from one another, if you've got a problem, hey, we had a discussion, for example, on the Facebook group, CSTA K-8, about trying to teach Scratch Junior in Zoom, online, and some ideas came out in that, people are trying to help one another, especially right now, we are in situations that all of us are learning. So if we can kind of, put the hive mind together, basically, and that's kind of what these communities do. You may have a better idea of how to solve something than I do. You may have tried something that actually really worked, right? And the rest of us would love to know about it. So the idea is, all of us together are better than each of us individually, so let's build these communities. Now, I agree that, and I personally am having real problems with Facebook myself these days because of things, and for quite a while. We are CSTA K-8 group is on Facebook because that's where it was voted it should be a few years ago. I don't know if that would be the same today. The problem is where to go because they all have issues, right? CSTA is actually going to be opening up discussion groups themselves on their platform. And so we will probably migrate there with that group, maybe have both of them simultaneous for a while, and hopefully that'll remove some of the issues that surround something like a Facebook. We'll probably stay on Twitter just because there's still a lot of people there, though we may experiment with doing more things in a platform like Zoom, where it's more a face-to-face discussion, or maybe an asynchronous thing through Flipgrid or something like that. No platform's perfect, but we want to try and meet people kind of where they are, and there's still a community that seems to be on Twitter for right now. Probably won't be that way long term. Things change and they evolve. We all know that. But that doesn't mean don't join them. They're valuable and they give you that connection. You don't have to feel like you're a lone person in a classroom doing something that no one understands what you're doing. There are people who understand and you can find them. And that may mean you have to be on a social media platform you don't always agree with. Go on and check that group and get off, right?
Yeah, that's what I do every Monday. All right, sign in, check CSTA K8 group, and then check the Twitter chat. All right, now I'm signing off for the week. I'm done. But I have found a lot of value in it. Like you mentioned the Scratch Junior post that you did, and the responses when I was meeting with our PD facilitators, I actually brought that up and was like, look, here are some good tips that we can apply into our professional development. So it's a good community. And you mentioned evolving. So we've seen the field of CS kind of explode in the past few years. It's had this exponential growth of evolution, and then the communities online that are being forged, like CSTA, reached record numbers with the conference, and then the engagement that's going online. Where do you see the field heading in the next decade or so?
I'm really horrible at predictions like this. Ask me about my prediction in the 70s about PCs. I was bad. I was wrong. Okay. But honestly, I'm hopeful that we'll see CS either as a core subject where it's taught right alongside everything else, or we'll come up with really good integration methods where it's just thought of that you do math and CS together, right? In especially elementary grades. I'm hopeful that we'll see that. I'm hopeful we'll see more states putting money where their mouth is as far as CS goes, not just saying, hey, we have these standards now and we have money to support those for teachers to learn about and teachers to know how to teach it, and not just at the high school level. So much stuff is still only at the high school level, but it's too late by then. If we wait until high school, kids already kind of know what they think they're interested in. And CS has a stigma still, and they're not going to get into it then most of the time. So I think we need to start in elementary, and we can't lose them in middle school, because that's another thing I see happening in education. Elementary schools are doing it because they've got a little more wiggle room about what they can do in their curriculum, and then it's dropped in middle school. And then high schools have it again. But you lose those kids in middle school. That's where those stereotypes kick in. That's where girls think it's not good to be smart, right? Kids get turned off to math and they don't pursue it in high school. So I'm hopeful that districts will see it as something that needs a pathway K to 12. And I think if CSTA continues to push it and to grow and to provide PD it's providing and to provide, all of the resources that it provides, that it can be helpful to teachers that want to do this in their schools, and it can be helpful to how you can do it. I am hopeful that we'll see it. More and more states are passing standards. And so I just want to see that next step of not only do we have standards, we're now going to provide funding and a path for those districts to start using them and providing classes all the way through K-12.
How do you practice or iterate on your own abilities, either in computer science or as an educator?
I've actually found COVID interesting for that because there's so many things online now. There's so many people offering PD online, and so I'll jump into things that I find interesting, even if they're not CS related. I've done a lot of things on equity and inclusion over the summer, just to make sure I'm thinking correctly on that, so that I'm trying to be equitable and inclusive in my classrooms. And I find that that's been really helpful. So I try and do online things. Of course, normal PD, love the CSTA conference every year for CS stuff. And I usually try over the summer and challenge myself to learn something new, whether it's taking a more advanced Python course or something like that online. I didn't last summer because I'm in the tech department at my school and we were busy trying to figure out what the school year was going to look like. So I was actually working most of the summer, but I usually try and do that. And I try and be reflective of myself. Like I will try and make notes after classes on what went well, what didn't go well, what I might want to change the next time. Because if I don't write it down, I forget. And then I'll look at it and go, well, I want to do that this year, but I know something didn't go well last year, but I can't remember what it is. Even if I don't publicly do that, I'll try and make notes on, I don't have detailed lesson plans, but I usually have some kind of, especially now, I have some kind of slides or something that I do with that. So I'll put a note into the slide. Oh, this did not go over well. Redo this part, so that I know when I'm looking back on it that I need to change it. And it may not have worked because it was virtual, right? And it may be fine in person. So because I find I'm having to tweak a lot of things as we try and move it to virtual. It's like, oh, that really went well last year. Oh, not going to work this year because we're virtual. So
yeah, that's a practice that I also did. Like I used to actually videotape my classes and then go back and then like do different techniques of who was I focusing on, what kind of questions was I asking, and just like writing all these things down and then just like really critically reflecting on myself and going, what did not work well and why, and what worked really well and why. And sometimes those whys were out of my control, like they had a cupcake party or whatever. But it was still a good practice to go through and think through that. So I am curious, though, how are you taking care of yourself? Because there's just so much going on and so many demands putting on all educators right now. And then you're also going above and beyond and just continuing to dive deeper and learn new things. But what do you do to try and prevent that burnout?
I'm really bad at that, I will admit. I tend to be a workaholic, and it's a lot tougher now that work is at home, right? So I have to try and physically say, I'm turning off the computer. I am turning it off and leaving the room. I will admit I'm not good at it. I've been trying to be better the last month or so because I found myself just being on edge and stressed out. And I know it's because I was spending too much time working. Pre-COVID, I loved to go to concerts, right? But of course, I can't do that now. I do attend some online, but again, that I'm still in front of a computer, right? And it's not the same experience as going to a live concert. So I don't find it quite as satisfying. And it isn't the escape from being on a device.
Right.
I also really love photography. And I love to go out on photo walks and just take pictures from unusual perspectives and stuff like that. I have not done that much lately because it's been 90 plus degrees out and was very smoky for a while because of the fires. So I haven't been walking too much, but the weather will turn at some point and then I'll go out and do more of that. So then I also get, where I'm moving because I find I don't move as much as I should too. So, and sometimes I'll just, read some stupid book that has nothing to do with anything, that's totally an escapist book. And then it's not on a device, it's an actual book. And, I'm not trying to learn anything from it. So,
Yeah, I used to be nonfiction only. Like, I was like, well, what's the point if I'm not learning something new? And then I was like, okay, a lot of people keep saying they really value getting into fiction. And so I tried it, and I feel like it helps relax me. Like, I do it before I fall asleep. But two, it also just like opens up new perspectives and ways of thinking, and like just helps with creativity, which is a heavy load on my job. Like, I'm constantly creating new projects and lessons and things like that. So I personally find a lot of value in that. And then your comments about like just getting up and moving, that also relates to why you saw me yesterday in the meeting while walking on a treadmill. Like, I'm tired of sitting in meetings like for 8 hours a day, so I need to make sure I'm moving.
yeah, I like that. I'm working on a desktop right now, and I can't get it high enough to even stand. So I'm trying to work out something where I can readjust it so I can move my big monitor up and be able to stand, because just even being able to stand rather than sit is helpful, I find, so.
What do you wish there's more research on that could inform your own practices?
Yeah, good question. I just don't think there's enough research on especially elementary K to 8 CS as it is. And so much of it is narrowly focused on like a certain thing. I would like to have more research done on transfer of things, because I think that is so hard, right? To get, you hear so many people say, oh, if they learn to code, they'll know how to think and it'll help them in all of their other classes. But in reality, that's not true. You can make it happen. But how can we make it happen? I would love to see research on how can we, because it should transfer, but it doesn't. So I'd love to see why and how we can help make it transfer, because I think there is value in that. And I think it is possible. And I have seen it, anecdotally myself, but I don't know what caused it to work, right? So I'd love to see more research on that.
Yeah, if any professors are listening, I agree. Please research that more. Do you have any questions for myself or the field?
Where do you see the field going in 10 years?
With everything going on in COVID, what I would have answered to you in February is very different than what I would answer for you right now. In terms of CS was just on this like straight path, just going really fast, like towards everybody's doing this, we're getting all these standards, etc. But now it's, well, we don't really have time for all of these other subject areas. And so not just CS, but I'm seeing anything that was not considered core is now on the chopping blocks in some districts, or just not being taught at all. So once this gets through, I do see us picking back up some steam, pun intended there, in terms of being able to get back into the swing of things and continue to drive home the importance of this. I just hope that as a field, we don't just focus on CS for jobs, but also talk about CS for leisure or for personal and community health and wellness and those kind of applications. So my hope is that the field kind of broadens to discuss the importance of CS in relation to that. But that's just more of a hope than it is I think we're going in that direction. I want to try and help steer us in that direction.
I would love that direction. And part, especially when you're talking elementary and even middle school, it's like to talk CS for jobs, to me, is insane. It should be CS for personal expression. What do you want to do with CS, right? And if we're not approaching it that way, again, I think it's not as engaging for kids either. If you're just talking about some future job they might get, that's crazy. So, like I said, our microbit projects, for example, they're some of my favorite things, because it's kind of like, what do you want to make with this, right?
Right.
We teach them mini lessons on how to do things on it, and then we say, okay, you know how to do all the stuff, now go make something with it. And it's purely what they want to make.
Right.
We may frame it in terms of, what do you want to make to solve this kind of problem, or pick a problem to solve and make something, which can make it even more engaging at times. But I think that's the power that CS has. And I think if we're not going that direction, it's kind of a fail to me if all we are doing is emphasizing jobs.
Yeah, and I co-wrote a critical paper on that subject area that I can put in the show notes for this. But so the nonprofit that I work for has partnered with Amazon Future Engineer. And one of the first things that I asked them when we were in talks about this is, like, just based off of the name, I hope you're not thinking that we're going to try and like make kindergartners want to become a future engineer at Amazon. Like, that is not the point of what we do with our curriculum, our PD, etc. I was so happy with their response, being a very critical person on this thing, that I was like, okay, I don't see any red flags. Like, they were 100% on board. Like, look, we're not trying to get everyone to work for Amazon. Like, we're just trying to help out kids, and we think elementary is a great place for them to do creative things with computer science. And so I was like, yeah, this sounds great. I'm on board with that. But initially I was skeptical just because of the name of the organization.
Right. The name of the organization leads you to believe we're trying to build a little Amazon engineer.
Right.
No, we're not. So yeah, I agree. The jobs thing has always made me crazy. It's like when I go into a session and the first thing you see is, why should we do CS? Because look at all these jobs we need to fill. I'm like,
yeah,
okay, I'm not interested.
Yeah. Yep. Do you have any suggestions for me on how we could potentially improve this podcast in terms of better serving the field?
I've liked what I've listened to so far. I really like your ones where you're delving into the research, because I think a lot of teachers aren't reading the research because
right.
The research isn't necessarily super practical for stuff I can use in my classroom tomorrow. So I think that part's really important, and I think can be very valuable to the field. It gives teachers an insight into that, and you do talk about practicalities of how you might apply that in your teaching. So I think that's really important. I don't know. I can't think of anything specific. I'm just wondering if maybe it would take it a different direction, but I wonder if every once in a while some kind of student voice might be interesting to talk to students from the perspective of what helped them feel like CS was for them, even if it's at a high school level student, right? Because they might be a more interesting interview than a, sixth grader, but that could be interesting too. I'm just thinking in terms of, because me as a teacher, knowing what's hitting home with the kids can be really helpful to know. Like, I always enjoyed the student panel at the CSTA conference where you hear from the students of how they were influenced by their teachers. So that could be an interesting thing to add.
Yeah, I like that. I'll have to start reaching out, see if we can find some. Where might people go to connect with you and the organizations that you work with?
If you go to visionsbyvicky.com, it has links to all my social media. I'm Visions by Vicky on Twitter. I'm Visions by Vicky on Scratch. I'm Visions by Vicky on, let's see where else, Instagram. So the CSTA K-8 Facebook group is a great place to connect with me. So I have CSK8 chats on the first and third Wednesdays of each month at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. You can also contact me through csteachers.org because I'm on the board there too.
And with that, that concludes this week's episode of the CSK8 podcast. As always, you can connect with Vicky by clicking on the links in the show notes. I include the links to her handles that she was just mentioning, like Twitter, Instagram, Scratch, etc. If you enjoyed this episode, I hope you consider sharing this with another CS educator who might benefit from listening to it. Stay tuned next week for another Unpacking Scholarship episode, and stay tuned 2 weeks from now for another interview. I hope you're all having a wonderful week and are staying safe.